The Commanders are likely to take a quarterback of their own, assuming Caleb Williams goes to Chicago. Is it Jayden Daniels or Drake Maye at 2 for Washington? Adam, we'll go to you first. What are you hearing about Washington's plans for that number 2 pick?
They're getting closer to a decision here, Laura, and I think they're honing in on it right now. They've winnowed their choices to just a few right now, and I think the signs continue to point to Jayden Daniels at number 2. Now, there was the issue last week where his agent wasn't particularly thrilled with the 4 quarterbacks that came in at the same time. I think they were disappointed that Jayden Daniels didn't have more face time in front of the Commanders. But the fact of the matter is this is the draft. This is not free agency. Jayden Daniels is going to go where he's drafted, and he's going to be happy about going to Washington if, in fact, the Commanders do settle on that particular decision and move forward with the former Heisman Trophy winner. He'll go to Washington. He'll be ready to be the face of that franchise. And again, you talk to the people around the league, there are people who believe that he is Lamar Jackson 2.0, who comes into the NFL with more refined throwing techniques, leaving college right now. It's going to be hard for, I think, Washington to bypass that.
Adam, Jayden Daniels and Drake Maye both started exactly 26 games over the last 2 seasons. Daniels accounted for 1 more total touchdown than Maye, while Maye had the edge in total yards per game. Daniels played a total of 5 seasons in college and is 23 years old, while the 21-year-old Maye enters the draft after 3 seasons at North Carolina. Some of that has to do with some differences in the most recent season they played. But Mel, you have Jayden Daniels going to Washington in your most recent mock. What is the biggest difference to you when you compare him and Drake Maye?
This is what you saw, Laura. You go back to the Virginia game. This is Virginia. Drake Maye struggled against the Virginia Cavaliers, NC State, and parts of that game. You think about what Jayden did. Jayden didn't struggle. Jayden didn't have an off game. Jayden had a great game from day 1 till the end, and he had 2 great games back-to-back years against Alabama. So while he's lighting up Alabama and Nick Saban's defense, Drake Maye struggling against Virginia. So again, with inconsistency in the actor, now you're picking apart guys because you have to separate them. So somebody's got to be 1, somebody's got to be 2, somebody's got to be 3. You can't have both. So the bottom line is you got to pick between the 2. I've always liked Jayden. Jayden's been like Joe Burrow from year 1 to year 2 at LSU. The monumental leap. Joe Burrow did the exact same thing. Drake Maye was expected to challenge Caleb Williams. It just didn't happen late in the year. He had Tez Walker. He had some open receivers. He had time to throw, and he was just off with some of those throws like a pitcher. Didn't have his best stuff. So the bottom line is, yes, he has a ton of talent. Yes, he can be great. But right now, Jayden Daniels, I think, is more deserving of being the 2nd pick overall.
See, Mel, the one big year for me is a pro, not a con. You just mentioned it. Joe Burrow did the same exact thing his junior to senior year. And it was an okay junior year. And then the lights out senior year, there's Joe Burrow at the top. His junior year, 2018, he was fine. He was good. 2019, arguably the best season in the history of college football for a quarterback. And Jayden Daniels, junior year, he was good. He was fine. It was identical to Joe. And then this past season wins the Heisman, and one of the best quarterback seasons we've seen in college football. I look at it as a pro, Mel, because of this, development. It's not potential. It's not, hey, cross our fingers and hopefully it pans out. It's a developmental position, and we have watched Jayden Daniels, who was a true freshman at Arizona State, play good, and then his 2nd year play fine, and then his 3rd year during COVID, not great, and then his 4th year in college football, play good, and then his 5th year put it all together after the transfer. Joe Burrow transferred. So really, I look at those second seasons, Mel, as like their sophomore year of college football, almost essentially. It was the 2nd year in the offense, the 2nd year at the group, 2nd year at the program, and all of a sudden they become elite players. I'd rather know in the NFL, like, hey, worst case scenario, I got a really, really good player, and I think he's just starting his development.
How do you see their new OC, Cliff Kingsbury, building an offense around him to continue his success?
Well, when we think about Cliff Kingsbury, we think air raid, quarterback in the gun, slinging it all over the field. And frankly, some of that does translate pretty clearly for Jayden Daniels. But I think he would be doing him a disservice if he didn't incorporate a robust design quarterback run game coupled with the RPOs, not too dissimilar from what we saw Philadelphia do with so much success in 2022 with Shane Steichen, that power spread attack where you get numbers advantages with the threat of the quarterback run, and then you exploit those one-on-ones you see on the outside, which of course we saw Jayden do so successfully throwing the football outside the numbers at LSU. I think he is extremely good at dicing up defenses from the pocket, so it would be a good fit. For me, the only thing that Cliff needs to get better at, and really when you look at Philadelphia from 2022 to 2023, you see a similar issue, is sequencing plays in a way that Steichen did. But if he's able to, I think, replicate that offense to some degree, I could see Jayden having a lot of success in it.
Yeah, I would also encourage Mina, the Washington Commanders. Cliff Kingsbury really shouldn't matter in this. I mean, you take the best player. Cliff has got to mold around the player rather than, hey, who fits what Cliff Kingsbury wants to do. And I think that's what's different for me in the Jayden Drake Maye conversation. Because if you're Washington, right, and I love Drake Maye's talent, but if you're Washington and you take Drake Maye, I think there's two things that need to be paramount. Number one, you better have the right people in that building to develop him, because he is going to need really good hard coaching development-wise. And then two, you better be patient with the coaching staff and front office regime, and that's abnormal. And here's my thing. I've talked about this with Drake Maye and the mechanical issues, his feet. If you look at since 2017, some of the quarterbacks that have been drafted that did have mechanical flaws, Zach Wilson's lower half, Sam Darnold, lower half, Mitchell Trubisky, lower half, Justin Fields, his little bit of his throwing motion. Patrick was a little bit of a case study in, man, this freestyle play. All of those guys struggled except for two, Josh and Patrick. Patrick barely played his rookie year. He played in week 17. And then Josh, while he played more than 10 games, also struggled as a rookie. The point is this. You can't take, I just talked about it with Zach, you can't take these young, talented, but mechanically flawed quarterbacks and just play them right away, because the data isn't just, well, young quarterbacks struggle. No, it's the young quarterbacks that are mechanically flawed that struggle early on and more often than not fail in the NFL. That's if Washington, that's where I get hesitant with Drake Maye, because I would expect them to want to get Drake Maye on the field sooner than he's really ready for it.
There's so many different ways you can look at this too, because unfortunately for these teams that have taken these guys early, they need them to play because they don't have anybody else. And that's why they're picking where they're picking. And then everyone else is trying to find the next Patrick Mahomes. But how do you sit him for that time? It's fascinating to watch. Mel, I realize you made an argument for why you've ranked quarterbacks where you've got them earlier. But what would be your argument to the Commanders if you were making a case for Drake Maye?
Talent and potential. I mean, he's 21 years of age. He's shown flashes of brilliance at North Carolina. There's no question about that. Going into the year, I thought maybe he could challenge Caleb Williams to be the #1 pick overall. He got off to a decent start, didn't have Tez Walker, and then when Tez Walker was back in there or got into the games, he was off his game. And it was like you say, it was precise passing, throws that should be on target weren't, made the receiver work for it, and just like I say, just wasn't bringing his A game. And that was against NC State. There were some plays against Miami, Clemson. You can pick apart that, in Virginia, as I said. So he needs to sit, watch, and learn, I believe, for a year. At the Dano's point, I think Drake Maye, they tighten up that delivery a bit as well. All of a sudden, we saw even Justin Herbert, even at Oregon, wasn't perfect, but the talent was there. If you have that kind of ability, and you have the want to and the desire to be the first one in and the last one out, and Drake Maye has that, then you have a lot to work with. It's right now, Jayden is just right now a better quarterback than Drake Maye. Jayden is ready. Drake Maye needs some time, but in the end, 3 years down the road, we'd be looking at Drake Maye and say, hey, what a quarterback he is.
Yeah. I mean, arm talent, the athleticism, the size, Mel laid it all out. I think I want to make a quick point in Maye's favor that comes off of our discussion at the top of the show about Zach Wilson, his lack of success in the NFL, because people might be hearing us talk about Drake and his big arm and think, well, okay, people said that about Zach Wilson, the infamous pro day throw, and obviously the evaluators were very wrong about him. Of course, the situation impacted him as well. I will say this, Zach Wilson at BYU was barely pressured. In fact, this was a major concern of mine watching his college tape as he played behind like a brick wall against inferior competition. We didn't see him forced to create. He was so rarely put through adversity. Drake Maye this year was under pressure a great deal. And that's something that really jumped out to me watching this season, especially compared to last season. And I'm not saying that necessarily writes off the mechanical issues or it's an excuse for everything, but he is not the same type of prospect because of his circumstances at UNC, which even with Tez Walker back, I would still put behind the other quarterbacks in this class.
Anyone who's spent any time with JJ, you know that he is incredibly mentally strong and focused. That's kind of what he bases his game off of, right? And you spent a lot of time with him, Adam. What else did you take away from that interview and maybe some other conversations you've had?
He's an impressive young man. And again, playing quarterback is not just the talent and the arm strength. It's all the intangibles. And J.J. McCarthy has all those. He's the kind of guy you want to have in your locker room as the face of your franchise. He's got the full support of that team. He radiates positivity. He is just so pleasant to be around, such an upbeat, upstanding guy. And so that is why I think there are teams out there that have fallen in love with the guy, and why we've seen his stock rise during this process, because it's beyond just the things that we've seen on the field. It's all the intangible factors that I think elevate his status and make him a first-round draft pick that we fully expect is going to go at some point in the first 11 picks on Thursday night.
Yeah, he's a connector of people, Adam. You even think about some of the things that Michigan team went through last season. JJ was kind of the glue that held everybody together. Let's get Mina and Dan back in here. And Mina, we have linked McCarthy to, like, I don't know, 7 teams, 6 teams. But which situation would actually be the perfect landing spot for him in your mind?
Well, it's the one that Adam sort of slyly hinted at there when he said the first 11, because that's Minnesota at 11. The question is whether they're going to have to go up and get him, which is entirely possible. But, you know, the Vikings are a dream destination for any quarterback, but I think it's especially true for J.J. McCarthy. At the beginning of this segment, when you had Dan comparing him to Kirk Cousins, I was nodding in agreement, because you see a lot of the similar skills in terms of the accuracy, throwing over the middle of the field. He's excellent off of play action. You certainly saw that at Michigan. He's good at throwing off the move. He's tough. He will hang in a pocket and take hits, which is, by the way, a really underrated aspect of Kirk Cousins' game. So if Minnesota takes him, it will because they see him and it's just easy for them to map his skill set onto Cousins. And I wouldn't be surprised if they're drawn to it because of that.
Yeah, I agree. In October of this past season, during one of Michigan's games, I tweeted out, J.J. McCarthy's going to look awesome as a Viking. One of the things that I've become frustrated with is people talking about him like he doesn't have remarkable arm talent, like remarkable ability to throw the football. And in the play-action pass game, which is what he ran a ton in Michigan and what he would run a ton at Minnesota, I think he's the best in this class when it comes to operating that stuff, seeing the defense and playing with multiple personnel and making some of those difficult throws. This is against Washington, 21 personnel, 2 back, 1 tight end. Minnesota's going to run this, the dagger concept, the deep cross in and in. Now this backside tight end is going to block. JJ has to play fake and see that backside safety. If he bites down, we want to throw the crosser. Ball fake happens, you see it, get his eyes to that back safety right now. Okay, so that creates vacant space. Now find that middle field safety to make sure he's not overlapping too much. One hitch and let the ball loose. Look how in rhythm this is. One hitch and cut that ball. Now, that backside safety is already turning and running. He's got to throw this ball to that small window right now. That is outstanding play action pass operation, mechanics, and execution. That's not just like, that's not the highlight clip. That's all over his tape.
Yeah.
That's all over what Minnesota what the Vikings want to do with Kevin O'Connell. So when it comes to, can we take a guy that's incredibly talented? He was the 5th ranked quarterback coming out of high school. Okay, it wasn't like this guy came out of nowhere, all right? Incredibly physically talented, and put him in a place and he's going to go. I would tell you this. If Minnesota takes him, he is the by far early favorite for Offensive Rookie of the Year.
Wow.
With the talent that they have in the scheme, it's the ideal place for him.
Assuming the Bears take Caleb Williams with the first pick on Thursday night, it certainly seems like they've set him up for success. The Bears added DeAndre Swift and Keenan Allen this offseason, adding some much-needed playmakers alongside DJ Moore. That trio makes Chicago the only team in the NFL that has 3 players who recorded at least 1,200 scrimmage yards last season. Mina, what can the Bears do differently with Williams to avoid the repeat of the Justin Fields era, in addition to some of these things they've already done to try to set him up for success?
Well, first, to your point about the things that they've already done, I don't think they're done in terms of adding talent around him, whether it's a left tackle or if Rome Odunze is there at 9. I think they need to be open to continue adding on offense, because Keenan Allen, that's really a 1-year deal, and it would be great to have an elite wide receiver who's on the same contract track as Williams and Odunze. So I would really consider that, and if not then, later in the draft, because so many excellent wide receivers and offensive linemen. The other thing is this. When I think about how the Bears bungled their handling of Justin Fields, so much of it was offensively, from a scheme perspective, trying to fit a square peg into a round hole, essentially waiting too long year after year to tap into his dynamism as a runner. Now, with Williams, it's not the same thing. He's not a similar run, but as Dan said, his superpower is making plays outside of structure. Yeah. And I think for Chicago and for Shane Waldron, they have to find that fine balance of asking him to play in structure, and he's very good at it, by the way, when he throws the football on time in rhythm, without constraining him or stopping him from at times tapping into that creativity, because it is what makes him great. And they can't do what they did with Justin Fields, which is basically ask him not to do that at all. They just have to tweak it so it's some of the time, not all of the time in Chicago.
Dan's mad because you guys have the same brain.
That's my friggin' note. So much of what made him special was out of nothing, and his obedience to play within the construct of the offense. I do think, like, I'll exacerbate that a little bit. So Caleb is this unique physical talent, right? And so often, because of the situation at USC, it was, we can't win unless you score 40, because the defense was so bad.
Yeah.
So he would, at times, play himself out of structure strictly because I'm just going to try and score and make plays. So the beauty of him is making something out of nothing. Sometimes it wasn't out of nothing, just making something happen. That's not that realistic in the NFL. And then two, it's this offense that Shane Waldron, the new offense coordinator who's with the Rams and with the Seattle Seahawks, it's best when the quarterback is obedient. Hey, this is the play. Let's just run this play. It's the Kevin O'Connell. It's the Kyle Shanahan. And that's a challenge for physical talent marvels. Is like they don't want to play in structure. They don't want to play with obedience. They want to go make stuff happen. So I think that's going to be, to Mina's point, like the challenge for both parties. I also say this, Mina, how much RPO are they going to run with Shane? Because Caleb ran it like top 10 in college football last year when it came to usage. That's not really a huge part of Shane Waldron's offense. I think that will be interesting to see is how much they tap into that as well.